Few places in the U.S., if any, are as visually stunning both from the sky and with boots on the ground as Utah. These slotted red canyons and mountains that block out the sun can make a person feel like a bug on the windshield of the universe. It stops you in your tracks and then begs you to explore it. People flock from all over the world to come here and do just that. How fascinating is it then that a place with such an offering of outdoor adventure would also harbor such an undying romance for a sport that they play almost exclusively indoors? My name is J. Kyle Mann. I cover basketball for The Ringer, and this is Home and Away, a series where we go in person to attempt to experience the basketball soul of a place. In episode 4, we felt it was time we took that age-old advice. And dig into the past, present, and future of round ball in Utah, a place where the love affair for this game resonates with a unique intensity. Safe to say sports and religion have a ton in common. The community and the tribalism that they spur are strikingly similar at times. Both have sacred rituals, carefully protected histories and traditions. You might even see one calling on the power of the other to intervene. But rarely, if ever, is a faith associated heavily with a particular sport. And if you flip through the spiritual Rolodex of the world, it's hard to come up with anything that parallels the Church of Latter-day Saints and its obsession with basketball. As you can imagine, it's a chief reason why we came out here. Basketball was invented in 1891, roughly 44 years after Brigham Young led a chunk of his followers here in 1847. As was true in most cold weather places, the game was appealing because it was cheap and it required fewer people to get a game going. By the early 1900s, the organized game had been adopted by LDS-affiliated schools, but running parallel to that was the enthusiasm for the game that was unfolding at the churches themselves in multi-purpose rooms called cultural halls. These rooms vary in size, layout, and architecture, but they served as a two-way apparatus in relationship to the sanctuary. For members, it was a place to fellowship. For non-members, it was a safe space where an invitation to the sanctuary could be extended. At one point, competition between churches actually superseded competition between schools or anything similar. These days, church ball is still a huge part of the culture, but other allegiances have taken precedent. John Merrill and Gary Sellius are longtime fixtures in a town called Bountiful, which is about 15 minutes north of Salt Lake City. They share a connection through their hooping sons. Merrill is the father of Sam Merrill, aka Mountain West Luka, now a 5-year NBA veteran and a rotation player for the surging Cavs after clawing for a footing in the league. Sellius is the father of Zach Sellius, a perimeter sniper who started BYU before heading to Germany to play for Oliver Würzburg. Sellius and Merrill's developments ran side by side, not just at Bountiful High School, where they whooped up on people and brought home a state title together, but on a day-to-day basis as youngsters who were cutting their basketball teeth at the same church.
Since it's so cold here, I mean, is this sort of like a replacement for the playground culture? Because
it's pleasant today. Neither of us have a coat on. It's beautiful.
I'm sure there's more LDS churches on corners in Utah than there are 7-Elevens on corners in Utah. They're everywhere, and the majority of them are being used for pickup games, and especially in winter.
When we grew up, the key was finding somebody with a key. We spent hours with our children down here shooting threes. There was always a place to go shoot.
There's a stereotype for players from Utah that feels almost European. Dynamic, highly skilled, and fundamentally sound, but with a little dash of flair and artistry mixed in. My reckless hypothesis is that this resource played a part in cultivating that. Gary Sellius oversees camps and clinics for Jazz Youth, a youth development program created by the Jazz when the team moved here, so you'd be safe in calling him knowledgeable on this. In this area, he thinks things are changing.
Growing up and all the way through our kids playing it was basically you'd call up all your buddies and you'd show up at the gym and play. And that puts you in more of a creative atmosphere. You could go out, you can experiment, you could do things without somebody getting mad at you, a parent yelling at you, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong. And now everything has to have a parent piece to it, or it has to have a trainer piece to it.
Guiding lights are often what inspire players to find their way onto the court, and that can heavily influence what happens once the ball's in the air. In Utah, there have been some notable characters on that front.
I think there was a Jimmerification within the LDS community. And yet Jimmer came down and he just would jack it, right? I mean, it's from anywhere, right? And then what happened is if you watched high school games, it started that you come down and you just jack, right?
So Jimmer was sort of the Utah Steph Curry in a way?
Yeah, in my mind, yeah.
Before that, another duo resonated in a number of ways.
Stockton Malone, really, I think that was a game changer for the state of Utah. People wanted to be a pure point guard. In high school, 7-8 assists a game was not uncommon. And now it's nobody really takes pride in that piece of it. I think it was more a situation that when somebody ran a pick and roll, you recognized it. And so I think it became more apparent after them.
Day breaks on the Big D's, and after talking to John and Gary, it's clear that we need to dig deeper on the driving basketball force in the state. Cup your ear to the wind and you hear an unmistakable excitement in the air. Yes, the 9-28 Charlotte Hornets are in town to take on their beloved Utah Jazz, who at the moment are sitting at 10-29 on the season. The Jazz are in, let's call it a talent acquisition phase. They're resetting after the end of a productive era with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, among others, but one key acquisition has been Will Hardy, the 37-year-old coach whom they lured away from Boston, where he'd been an assistant. Hardy is known as a whiz of a tactician, and his first task as Jazz coach has been to figure out exactly what they have so that they can better understand what they need.
Yeah, I mean, we're in a developmental phase. That's not a secret. We're playing a lot of young players. We're trying to develop them. We're trying to learn more about them, figure out who they are, and position ourselves the best way we can to have a championship banner hang here.
Take a lap around this place and you can understand how a person might think of the North Face or the Winter X Games before they thought about things like And One Mixtape or Slam Magazine.
You know, when you think of like New York City, you think of basketball. When you think of LA, you might think of basketball, but this place is basketball nuts. And I didn't know that fully until I got here.
Some teams have it easier than others when it comes to the process of building a team. Evaluation and selection in the NBA draft are particularly important for the Jazz because free agency has historically not been as fruitful. Superstars don't typically flock to Salt Lake City. When players are given the chance to pick where they want to live, naturally, cultural comfort plays a role. For a league that has been predominantly black since integration and their merger with the ABA, that cultural comfort is still a work in progress. Thurl Bailey is the color commentator for the Jazz and played for the team for 9 of his 12 seasons. He came to Utah as a rookie in 1983, fresh off of a storied college career. On the court, his acclimation here was relatively seamless. Off the court, he found himself in a desert of commonality.
When I came out here, a lot of the cultural things that I was used to just weren't there. And there weren't many black people that I crossed paths with other than guys on the team. And maybe every once in a while I'd be driving to practice and I'd see a black guy waiting for the bus. I'd find out his name and I'd wave to him every time I passed him. And so that was probably one of the more notable things as an African American.
Progress. It's an important part of a growing state like Utah and must be taken seriously.
An insulated existence away from ideas or experiences that might challenge the boundaries of your worldview is a state of being that people in the majority have the option to choose. Those in the minority are not afforded the same luxury of choice. For Thurl, the combination of exposure to the cultural adversity that his people faced and guiding forces in his life that practiced graciousness, patience, and tolerance as a response prepared him to navigate this unfamiliar terrain.
But I knew, because I was raised in the 60s and because my parents attended marches of Dr. Martin Luther King and they were at the monument when he made his famous speech. Oh, wow. I was really raised by 2 very good educators. This is a place, I believe, that has gotten a lot better at understanding how to recognize the differences and the likenesses that we all have. And we're more alike than we are different.
The Jazz are not the new kids on the block by any means, but they aren't among the old guard franchises in the league either. Despite never actually hanging a championship banner, their organizational stability over the decades has been fairly remarkable. Among the decision makers in the history of the NBA, that is, executives and coaches, I think that Frank Layden is arguably the most colorful and entertaining personality that the league has ever had. For all of his legitimate success when it came to winning basketball games, his impact as a lighthearted marketer for the league was massive. He was, and still is, a self-deprecating goofball with a razor-sharp wit.
All right, waitress, bring me cottage cheese.
Before League Pass and YouTube put video in our pockets and at our fingertips, the compilation VHS was a sacred item and played a huge role in causing young fans to fall in love with the sport. I was one of them. So for me, this visit was a very special treat. Frank's home overlooking Salt Lake City is a shrine to a rich life of basketball. A path that started in Brooklyn as the son of an Irish immigrant dock worker. Sports would lead him to attend Niagara, where he'd be roommates with some dude named Hubie Brown. And after some high school gigs and a shot in the big seat at his alma mater, he'd become an assistant with the Atlanta Hawks under Hubie. And in 1979, he was headhunted to man the front office for the New Orleans Jazz. A key omitted detail here being that a big change was on the immediate horizon.
I took the job, and then after I took the job, they said, oh, by the way, there is a catch. We're moving to Salt Lake City. And I said, how can you go to Salt Lake City? There's nobody there.
The appetite for basketball in Utah was undeniably present, but winning is the thing that creates fanaticism. That winning would require time, which required money, which required some shaking of hands and hustling in the community. Frank, an exotic creature here as a boisterous Brooklynite, Irish Catholic, and a Democrat, was the perfect character to drive that cause.
You know, people say, do you have a good team? I said, well, things like, I promise you, next year we will bring a championship team here to Salt Lake City, Utah. Yeah. People, I'd say it'll either be the Lakers, the 76ers, you know.
Times were tight in those early days. So tight, in fact, that the team had to draft Dominique Wilkins in 1982 knowing full well that he would refuse to come here so that they could, true story, trade him for money that would help them make payroll.
I wasn't going. Oh, hell no!
Success would slowly come, and in two key phases. The first was identifying and investing in overlooked or misused talent. They took a chance on a 7'4" JUCO transfer turned garage worker named Mark Eaton, who'd go on to become the two-time Defensive Player of the Year. They salvaged a former first-rounder whose inability to shoot the ball had washed him out of the league, and by 1984, Ricky Green had become an all-star. This and some savvy drafting had the Jazz competitive, but kept them just low enough in the standings to make critical acquisitions in back-to-back drafts that would change basketball in the state of Utah forever. At the time, John Stockton was a mop-headed waterbug point guard from a lesser-known school in the Pacific Northwest.
Gonzaga? Sure. What's that, a vocational school?
Fortune struck again when Karl Malone, a bruising ballerina of punishment and feathery touch out of Louisiana Tech, shockingly plummeted during the 1985 draft. Speculation about work ethic and personality traits seemed to play a part.
And I said, listen, you're a big, strong guy, and you're tough and everything, but you're going to be another Palooka in this league? Well, you're going to learn and become a good player and everything else. I got his mother out. His mother says, you don't listen to this man, I'm going to come back here with a baseball bat and hit you over the head. And that was it.
But Layden's instinct for finding a steady-handed guide for their offense and a scary-handed disruptor for their defense was on the mark. That sense for timing and orchestration even showed up while we were visiting.
Johnny.
What's up, Coach?
What are you doing?
I'm coming to town in, 2 weeks?
Okay.
Hoping to grab you for a lunch or something.
Let's definitely. I never refuse lunch, John. You know that. I might turn down a lot of things, but not lunch, all right?
The Stockton-Malone combo, both perennial all-stars and dream teamers in 1992, would go on to hit the Western Conference over the head for a decade. But the gritty nature of Jerry Sloan, who took over coaching duties from Frank in the late 80s, played a big part in establishing an identity for this franchise.
You know, I can remember Jerry saying at the first meeting, I know you guys looking at me and you're saying, he don't look that tough. I can take him. He said, you probably can. He said, but let me ask you this. In taking me down, you willing to lose an eye? Are you willing to lose your testicles? He said, because I fight dirty. He said, I'll knock the shit out of you. I'll beat the shit out of you every minute. He said, so even if you win, you're going to find out that you really didn't.
Still, a looming question that resurfaces from time to time is that name. Pardon me for finding it a bit bizarre to have the title for what's arguably the quintessential African-American art form represent an area that, by most every account, didn't have many black people at all. And they've changed their colors in the years since, but in the beginning it was even more absurd. Their purple, green, and gold colors were Mardi Gras inspired, a distinctly Catholic holiday in a place where the Church of Latter-day Saints was by far the most prominent faith. Many in the community at the time felt like changing the name to something more representative was the right thing to do, to respect the identity of the region and reflect it. And yet, the branding never budged. According to Frank, the situation was complicated behind the scenes, but he also saw an optimism in keeping the name.
The people down there were suing us because we owed money to the Superdome for rent. They were still fighting to get us back to stay there. So it was just easier for us to stay the way we were. But after a while, the Utah Jazz caught on, and it became a good name for the area because it neutralized what people were afraid to come here.
Much as I love Frank and appreciate the rationale, jazz remains an afterthought here. To be honest with you, I'd come here hoping to debunk the stereotype, but no luck. We monitored the event calendars in the area for a good while and repeatedly came up empty. I was starting to think that we would never find any jazz here.
Bye.
The road is leading us to a town called Millville, population roughly 2,500, which is like seemingly every town in the state, seated at the foot of a gorgeous mountain range. There's plenty of joy in Millville, and the generational talent that brought us up here is partly why. I'm talking about Emily Skinner, the 6-foot combo guard who was recently named a McDonald's All-American and has committed to play at Duke next season. Emily's offensive skill set is a lot like the living conditions here, dynamic and cold as Skinner is one of those no scouting ability required type of talents. Her aggressiveness and motor for guarding the ball, touch from behind the arc, and nimbleness in attacking the basket are glaringly obvious.
Do you have somebody that you watch and you add things, or where does the kind of information come from in your game?
I mean, I've always been a big Sue Bird and Steph fan. I've always loved Steph Curry growing up. I like watching Devin Booker a lot.
What specifically about his game?
Everything. He just can do everything. He's smooth.
Ainsley Jinks is in her 9th season coaching the team, and the uniqueness of this experience is not lost on her.
We won't see another Emily, and it's part of me is really sad because I've really enjoyed the last 4 years of getting to watch her have a front row seat to a kid that's just a really special kid. But Em set the tone as the type of basketball we want here at Ridgeline, which is we're playing as a team. We're playing tough defense, and we're working together to do things. And even though she is that generational player, absolutely, she's lived just by that.
That well-rounded skill set certainly piled up the stats. Emily became the 4th player in the history of Utah women's high school basketball to eclipse the 2,000-point mark, but it hasn't been limited to individual success. This Ridgeline team was in the midst of a 39-game winning streak at the time we visited, and that cycle of winning has put Jinx in some hilarious moments of experimentation.
Did I see a clip of you after a win grabbing the rim?
But yeah, I did. At the state tournament last year, fell right off.
Was it huge laugh or was it huge gasp? Like, is she dead?
Yeah, at first it was like everyone went silent, and then I like made a noise, and everyone was like, "Oh yeah, she's okay, she's alive."
Utah might not be on the tip of your tongue when it comes to college basketball lore, but they've had their moments.
Second place. You know who got first? You know.
The NBA's color barrier was actually broken by a player of Japanese heritage from here who starred at Weber State and at the University of Utah in the early 1940s, a 5'7" point guard named Wat Masaka. Among the natives and the imported students, there have been some impressive high points of individual talent and subsequent team success. Damian Lillard shot to the moon during his time at Weber State, even got a horse statue for it. Explain that one to me. Keith Van Horn, Michael Doliak, and Andre Miller led some fantastic Utah teams into the later weekends of the tournament under the watchful eye of the legendary Rick Majerus and his Reebok sweaters. Former #1 pick Andrew Bogut came through here too. Brigham Young University is located in Provo, and they started playing basketball over 120 years ago. In 30 of those seasons, they've reached the tournament, with the high point being a 1981 run to the regional final. They've seen players like Danny Ainge, of course, the unfairly novel career of Sean Bradley, who was better than people remember, and Jimmer Fredette. Kevin Young is in his first season at the Y, which is apparently only a nickname because some lazy Mormon students decided that they didn't want to haul any rocks up a mountain. Anyway, Kevin grew up LDS in Atlanta and comes to BYU after a long stint on the bench as an assistant coach in the NBA. His joining the program, behind the support of Jazz owner Ryan Smith and legendary alum Danny Ainge, because of NIL, comes at a time of tectonic shift in college sports. He and many others see that shift as an opportunity.
First of all, I think just trying to just buck the trend of like what BYU allegedly can or can't get done in terms of the types of players that want to come to BYU. That was my first thing getting this job was, we want to turn that on its head.
Luring top talent to Provo in the past has been a lot like, hauling rocks up a mountain. One of the motivating catalysts in changing that narrative, aside from personal connections and an appealing style that is reinforced by NBA-level know-how, is, money.
It's just been an explosion of, the entrepreneurial spirit here is honestly probably second to none. There's a lot of excitement, I think once BYU decided to go to the Big 12, I think people understood like, okay, we are leveling up.
There are templates for leveling up in college basketball. Plenty of teams have done it. But the driving force here is talent, players. And on that front, it's hard to top the addition of A.J. Debonsa, a major contender to be taken #1 in the 2026 NBA draft. His reported ask was $5 million, and although some heavy hitters were ready to meet that number, A.J., who's playing his final year of high school basketball in a middle-of-nowhere town in southern Utah, decided he'd lace it up for the Cougs.
Early days when I was like early with the Sixers, we had some veteran guys, and I'm like, man, I got to tell J.J. Redick what to do. This is crazy.
Did you have to win him over at all?
For sure you do. Absolutely you do. And I won him over by just telling him the truth and just being up front and not trying to be their buddy. So to tie that back to AJ, like if I can say something to KD, who's the 9th all-time leading scorer, I'm pretty sure I could say something to AJ, you know what I mean? And so
Still, in my mind, I'm thinking about the fact that the expectations for attending BYU are unlike other schools. This university is not only affiliated with the church, it's run by the church. While troops are coming over the hill on the distant horizon, it's been an up and down season for the Cougs. In turbulent times, it's helpful to have steadying forces, and one of those is a holdover from the Mark Pope era, Richie Saunders, a smiley 6'5" guard who grew up here and decided to splash threes at BYU.
Growing up, my dad was a religious leader, which came with having a key to the church gym. I really look back, those are special times. I started when I was 9. That's when we started really being serious in the gym every morning at 5.
A shared experience between Gary Sellius and John Merrill's sons and Richie and a host of other young men and women is a 2-year mission that is strongly encouraged by the church. The image of the hooping Mormon missionary has made its way around the block of pop culture many times now, but to them, it's no joke.
For me, I felt like I needed to serve a mission, and to put 2 years away from basketball is crazy, right?
So where'd you go?
So I was called to Madagascar, but I ended up through COVID, I ended up serving in Seattle.
Oh, okay.
So I ended up serving 2 years there. I mean, like, it really consists a lot of like helping other people and teaching. And if you're not doing either one of those, then a lot of times you're proselyting, right? And like, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. You get out of your comfort zone all day, every day.
Time away from that level of play is not something to be taken lightly in terms of working the body back. Seeing as this is a normal circumstance within the LDS Church, the methods for reintegration have evolved over time. It ain't easy, and it has to be handled with care.
What were the conversations like when you came back about getting you reacclimated?
Yeah, like they know what they're doing, right? They've had enough people coming back from missions and playing pickup and tearing their ACL or just those horror stories, right? So it's a very like ramped up thing. I remember it was like 1 week I would advance from like, okay, I can go and I can shoot, I can do one-on-one in the post, I can do one-on-one from the elbow, like all those like different little step ups to where you're back into playing pickup and back into full play. But
when did you start to feel like I'm Richie again? When did that happen?
Oh, it takes a long time. You know what I'm saying? Like I think it was 6 months to probably when we started playing games.
I did come out here having heard things about Utah. The giggling about odd rules and customs, the charged tweets, critical articles, and heated videos on the social climate.
Shut the F up!
It's all out there and it's easy to find. I'm not gonna act like my trek around this state convinced me that everything that I'd been led to believe was a lie. But if I'm taking an honest look at myself, a person who grew up in a heavily religious and mostly white part of the world that is also frequently misunderstood and misrepresented, it did remind me that I, of all people, should know that every story has context. On the ground, at eye level, I found the conviction and sincerity here to be hilarious at times, but overwhelmingly honest, while also welcoming. And in nearly every conversation that we had here, it became clear to me that people believe that Utah is changing, culturally and economically, with the game often entwined. And I sensed excitement for that. For a place that was so insulated, initially by design, for so long, it seems that positive exposure is going both ways. In researching this trip, I came across a video from an LDS church located in the Philippines. In the video, the speaker said something that stopped me in my tracks. Describing the basketball court at their church, he said, "On the court, the lonely find friends. Misunderstandings are healed, questions are answered." For a church, obviously that's an opportunity to invite people to their way of life. But I think this guy hit the mark in more ways than he intended. These spaces in life, these central places where our circles in the Venn diagram overlap, should be highly valued. Thankfully, basketball is one of them.